Okay, so today we're going to talk about World War One. This is a U.S. history course, so we're going to focus on the United States and its involvement in World War One. But before we talk about the U.S., we have to know and understand how the war in Europe starts. So today we're going to talk about some of the long-term causes and some of the short-term causes of the Great War, aka World War One. I am wearing my official World War One helmet. Just because why not? I have one. We're talking about World War One. It makes sense. Okay, those long-term causes are going to be militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And we're going to break down each of these terms and how each of these individually influence the long-term cause of the war. All right, militarism. It's this idea of increasing the size of your military. Pretty simple concept. The name pretty much tells what's going on here. So prior to World War I, you have all these European nations basically building up the size of their standing armies. They're increasing the size of their navies. That's been an ongoing trend throughout the mid-1800s as imperialism became more popular and European nations figured out that a strong navy makes you an imperial nation. They also figured out that it makes you a strong military nation as well. So building up your armies, building up your navies, building up your arsenals, building up your war supplies, the amount of bombs, the amount of tanks, everything, that is militarism. When one nation starts to build up their military, that makes the neighboring countries a little bit nervous. Hey, you're building up a ton of bombs and tanks, and you've increased the amount of troops that you have. That makes them kind of nervous. So in response, they build up their military in case that nation tries to invade or take over their nation. And this trend kind of happens throughout all of Europe. No one wants to be left out with a small military and be vulnerable to attack, to be susceptible to an invasion and just kind of left standing like, oh, we didn't see this coming. We don't have a strong military. Oops. No one wants to be caught left out of the military arms race. Alliances. So as these countries are starting to militarize, they also figure out, hey, strength in numbers sort of approach. If I can get a couple other countries on my side, if I am getting invaded, that'll increase my chances of not being invaded or to fend off an invasion. So a lot of these alliances were kind of secret. People didn't know about them. Other nations weren't aware of certain alliances taking place. Some of the alliances were more outright in the open. People were aware of who was siding with whom. This leads to an escalation of the war because it's no longer a traditional one-on-one style of war, one nation fighting against another. You now have multiple nations that immediately get sucked into this war, increasing the size and scope of this war. And this is where it gets really complicated, and this is where it gets tricky. We're not going to get into all the details. You don't need to know every single country involved or every single alliance. Just understand the basic principle and the key major alliances and the key imperialist nations involved here, and you'll be all set. So speaking of alliances, the two sides in the war, you have the Central Powers and you have the Allied Powers. The Central Powers are going to consist of Germany, the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Italy is initially part of this, but they back out in 1915, and the Ottoman Empire, which is present-day Turkey. So the main three players for Central Powers you'll need to know: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. The Allied Powers, again, these are the major key players you need to know and understand. Great Britain, France, Russia, and eventually the United States in 1917. We'll talk more about the U.S. in 1917 later. For right now, we're just focusing on the European side of this. Okay, another long-term cause. The third long-term cause, imperialism. We've talked about this in the context of the United States imperialism, the race for resources. Well, Europe has been doing this for, a couple hundred years, right? They've colonized North America, South America, Africa, Asia. They've been doing this for quite some time. Now, as we get into 1914, land is getting scarce, all right? The Europeans have taken up pretty much all the land in Europe. They've imperialized beyond their own borders, and things are getting a little scarce, all right? The competition for these resources is heating up. And it's getting to the point where no one wants to be left out. No one wants to not have access to the important key resources to any industrial nation or imperialist nation. We're talking about iron, we're talking about coal, we're talking about those things that make you a strong industrial militarized nation. So the other part of imperialism, the whole idea of like taking over other countries or imposing your dominant culture or ideas or government onto another country tends to not set well with other countries. They don't like to be told what to do, and World War I's kind of like all this imperialism kind of coming to a head. It's like the culmination of years and of imperialism coming to a boil here, and people are kind of looking to say like, well, enough is enough, and we want our independence. We don't want to be told what to do by the bigger, stronger country anymore. The fourth long-term cause of World War I is this idea of nationalism. It's got the word nation right in it. It's this idea that your nation is better than any other nation, this intense pride in one's country. And this is pretty dangerous because when you have a imperialist nation that's looking to expand its borders, a strong militarized nation, backing up this imperialist efforts, this is where nationalism kicks in and makes them not really afraid to back down. No one's going to give up on their imperialist ways. No one's going to give up on this idea that they are stronger and better than other nations. Well, yeah, we should be taking them over because we have a bigger military, we have a better government, we're a better people, we're a better race, all right? So the whole racism thing comes into play here again with World War I and with nationalism. So this is sort of like the final straw that kind of gives nations this strength or courage to sort of not back down from the potential war or anything that should result from imperialism. And then the short-term cause, what really triggers these alliances, what makes World War I come to a head? It starts in the Balkan Peninsula. All right, so if we're looking at Europe, here's Italy, the boot-shaped country. We can always identify that one. If we go to the right, this area here, the Balkans, all right, this area is pretty complicated. I'm not going to go into the history of the Balkans. I'll just give you the short and sweet version. Here in purple is the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and within the empire you have many different types of cultures and ethnic groups, and they all sort of want their own independence, especially this area right through here, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, all these different ethnic groups kind of all existing in one area, and this idea of nationalism kicks in here because you have people, these ethnic groups that want to become independent nations, separate from the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. But Austria is like, nope, we're strong, we're militarized, we're going to keep our thumb right on top of you people, and we're going to stay as part of our empire, right? Land, resources, we're not going to let that go. So you have this terrorist group known as the Black Hand that plots and carries out this assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Essentially, he's going, the prince is going through this goodwill tour through Sarajevo. He's like waving around, they're driving this open car. Here's a picture of him. Him and his wife Sophie, driving around, waving around. Oh, hey, people that we have imperialized. I am your prince. I'm the king to be someday. So what's up? I'm the best. You love me, sort of, kind of, maybe not, but whatever. So as they're driving around, essentially this Serbian terrorist group, the Black Hand, Gavrilo Princip is the guy's name who actually carries out the assassination, walks up to the car, shoots both Ferdinand and his wife Sophie. They die. This is the spark. This is what triggers World War I. This is what sets off the series of all these complicated alliances. So down here I've got a list of all the alliances and how this kind of starts. So bear with me here. It gets complicated. So because of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Austria-Hungary is like, what's up? We can't let you assassinate our prince, so we're going to declare war on Serbia. Makes sense. Well, Serbia was allies with Russia, so now they declare war on Austria-Hungary. Well, Germany is allies with Austria-Hungary, so they're going to say, well, we now have to come to the aid of our ally, and we are now going to declare war on Russia. Germany's just like, well, while we're at it, we might as well attack Russia's ally, who's France, so let's do this thing. And then Germany, on their way to France, they have to go through this tiny little country of Belgium, and once they go through Belgium to get to France, now Great Britain is just like, well, Belgium was our ally, and you've technically invaded them, so we now must come to the aid of France because they are our ally. Belgium is our ally, so essentially Great Britain is now on the side of France and Russia and Belgium as well. So now it's complicated, now it's messy, And that is essentially the start of World War I in Europe. Long-term causes: Maine, militarism, alliances, imperialism, nationalism. Short-term cause: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. This sets off those triggers of alliances. And this is in 1914. This is World War I, a war on an epic scale that the world has never seen before. And we'll get into the United States involvement in 1917 in a later lesson.